Thank you.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the Provo Municipal Council meeting for Tuesday, March 5th, 2019. It is 5:34 p.m. and we are gathered in the City Center Municipal Council chambers at 351 West Center Street, Provo, Utah. This meeting is being broadcast live on the web on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices, being respectful to others, and refraining from applause or other outbursts during the proceedings of the meeting. We will begin with a roll call. Mr. Strachan?
Cliff Strachan.
Brian Jones.
Coach Stewart.
Dave Sewell.
David Harding.
Kay Van Buren.
George Handley.
Dave Connect.
Mayor Kafusi.
Wayne Parker.
Thank you. We will begin with an opening prayer given by Mr. Grant Eckstein, and followed by the Pledge of Allegiance provided by Carrie House.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful that we can be here today in order to discuss matters that are of importance to the city. We're grateful for the opportunities we have to gather and to discuss these matters, and for the blessings that have come here to our city, to Provo. We pray that thou will bless us tonight, that the discussion points will be comprehensible and will make wise decisions, that the folks who speak and give their opinions will do so with clarity, and that ultimately the decisions made will be those that are for the best interest of Provo and for the neighbors. And we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you to both of you. We will begin with the approval of previous minutes. We have before us the minutes from the February 5th, 2019 council meeting. Are there any changes requested or any objections to what's in the minutes? Seeing none, we will approve the minutes by unanimous consent. Mr. Jones, would you please introduce the public comment portion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will still be taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Additional time may be given to individuals specifically invited to speak, such as applicants, neighborhood chairs, or others that may be representing additional persons. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. Due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Those with comments are invited to approach the podium at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. So in case that wasn't clear, if you would like to speak to the Municipal Council or the administration, you can come forward now to the podium, state your name and city of residence. Seeing no one approaching, we will close the public comment portion and move on to the agenda item number 2, which is an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 0.96 acres of real property generally located at 1356 South 500 West from residential agricultural to residential R18 in the Lakewood Neighborhood. And we will hear from Mr. Aaron Ardmore, Provo City Planner.
Thank you. So to remind you from 2 weeks ago, this is in proposal for a zone change from RA to R18 on the west side. Can we get the slides up there? To enable a 3-lot subdivision where there is a single lot currently. There we go. Right there. So there's a single lot, and then the rear portion would be developed into 2 other lots off of 570 West. So at the last hearing 2 weeks ago, there were some neighborhood concerns that we discussed for a time, mostly regarding building height of the homes that would be built on those 2 new lots. And item was continued to give staff and the applicant a chance to kind of work out those issues. And I think we've done that. Brian Jones has reviewed a development agreement proposed to go along with this zone change. The applicant has also reviewed and agreed to the conditions of that. She can speak to that when she comes up. But we went through a couple drafts and ended up with just some simple requirements. A, that no basements are to be built on the properties, and B, that homes be limited to 2 stories on those 2 new properties. So I think that resolves the height concerns that were shared last time, and that's really all I have that's new from the last meeting.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our presenter?
I was just going to ask, not Aaron, but Bryce, when you get a chance, if you could open up the draft of the development agreement and put paragraph 4 up on the screen that lists the special conditions, I think that'd be helpful to the council.
For A and 4B. Okay. At this time, we will invite the applicant, Angela, is it Eckstein or Eckstein? Eckstein, to come forward and address the council.
Yeah, thank you guys for giving us an extra 2 weeks to work on this. We had an email exchange with the neighborhood chair and community development myself and came to this agreement, and I feel like it does address the concerns brought up by the neighborhood chair because it does limit the height of the houses to 2 stories, which prevents it from invading the privacy of the neighbors next to us. As a reminder, the reason we're seeking this is because the RA zone is no longer serving its purpose for this property. There's no irrigation because Provo City cut that off about 10 years ago, so I can't water it. The fence is jutting out into the road and cars drive through it, so I cannot maintain a fence on the property. And there's some noxious weeds I can't get rid of without water. So all in all, it's not serving its purpose as an animal property. So we are looking to put 2 houses back there to finish the road, to beautify the neighborhood, to get it complete, to make the property more manageable, to be in line with Provo's general plan, to have it be residential and agricultural. And I have worked with the neighbors who are most affected by this, the ones immediately to my north and south. I've talked with both of them this week, and both of them are perfectly fine with this agreement that we have established with the neighborhood. So I hope that you will approve this tonight because I think that we've reached a amenable solution for Provo City, for ourselves, and for the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me? Thank you.
Good. Thank you. We'll now invite the neighborhood chair up to present or to address us. Becky Bogdan, the Lakewood Neighborhood Chair.
Hi. Yeah, that was agreed to. The only thing that we have a question on is what was brought up 2 weeks ago about if the neighbor to the south would be required to finish curb, gutter, and sidewalk as part of this. I was instructed by Rebecca Andrus a couple weeks ago that they did a preliminary CRC on this, and someone should be available to address that.
Looks like Mr. Ardmore will be able to address that.
Okay, that is the concern.
Okay, hang on just one moment. Are there any questions for our chair? Let me ask one. I think I've drawn a blank on it, but I think I'm drawing a blank on it. I apologize, but
That's okay, because if you remember, you can call me back up.
okay.
The neighbor to the south is here tonight, and so we would like some clarification. I do have a question, though. Is there a way that we could get it in writing? I mean, if she's not responsible for this, or how does that exactly work?
Perhaps we'll hear from Mr. Ardmore.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
I was just making sure there wasn't somebody from Public Works that could be more educated on it. But we just did discuss it in our coordinator review meeting last week, and essentially through the subdivision process, Ms. Eckstein will have to bond for the work that needs to be done for this curb, gutter, sidewalk, and it will end at her property line. So they'll have to address the sewer, not sewer, but stormwater inlet at that point. The property to the south, she doesn't have control of, the city doesn't have control of, so it will remain as is.
Okay, thank you. We did just have a representative, the director of Public Works, walk in, so I don't know if he wants to add anything to that, but that sounds. Let me just raise your hand if you object to this, or if you disagree with this. But we're talking about street improvements south of the property of Ms. Eckstein, and the property that's being rezoned. As it redevelops, it will need to have those features put on, but not the property to the south at this time, because they are not doing the redevelopment at this time. I'm getting nods, so I hope that addresses your question. I think that's Mr. Connect.
So I would just add that in the past, I have seen the city work with an area, usually it's a lot larger area with multiple properties, and they do a special improvement district to do curb, gutter, and sidewalk and other improvements. But, so that's in theory an option, but it's not one that we really have on the table. So that property is not at this time going to be improved. It would wait until such time as it was developed.
Yeah, and I think it's in the community's interest if those improvements were made, but unless the city's willing to come in and foot the bill for that, I don't see, there's no mechanism to say you need to do this without doing that. So, and just like yesterday, there wasn't anything in writing. So tomorrow, I don't imagine there'll be anything in writing. But it really, her property hasn't changed. So that's my understanding of it. Comment?
Question. This goes back to. Is this on now? I have no microphone. Anyway, Aaron and Brian, maybe on the resolution, I'm just curious where it says no homes, or the homes will be limited to 2 stories. In that R18 zone, can you have a 3-story home?
Technically, you could. The maximum building height is 35 feet,
It just
so
goes
it
to
just
the
depends on
height.
your
It
floor
doesn't
ratios.
address any stories.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, we will open this item for public comment. If you would like to address the council on this item, please come forward now. I thought I saw a hand. No? Okay. Okay, excellent. So we will close the public comment and bring it to the council for any discussion. Not seeing any, so I will,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
just one procedural thing. Because of the substitution of the development agreement, if it's the council's intent to approve the development agreement, there needs to be a substitute motion to substitute the ordinance with the version that approves the development agreement, which Bryce has just put up on the screen.
Thank you for that.
So moved. Second motion.
All right, we have a motion by Councilor Stewart and a second by Councilor Sewell. Any discussion on this motion to substitute the implied motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? That is unanimous with Mr. Winterton excused. And is there any further discussion on the now substituted implied motion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All in favor? That is unanimous with Mr. Winterton excused. Thank you for those who have participated in this. Item number 3 is an ordinance amending the general plan map from commercial to public facilities for approximately 23 acres and from commercial to mixed use for approximately 12 acres located at 178 East, 1860 South in the East Bay Neighborhood. And this item was continued from 2 weeks ago, and we will look to Mr. Josh Yost to address us.
Thank you. This was continued primarily due to the fact that we didn't have the specific red line language for the policy amendments to the Chapter 1 of the General Plan for you at the previous meeting. That red line text has been provided and hopefully passed on to you. And as was recommended, we merely added a provision to the Central Area Principles Central Area Policies number 15 to not strike the whole policy, but just accept this property from that policy. And then, as we discussed last week, struck policy 5 and 7 from the East Bay neighborhood policies.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Mr. Yost? Not seeing any. Thank you. We'll invite Provo Economic Development, if they are so interested, to address us at this time. I see a shake of the head, so we will invite Mr. Greg DeHannens, our East Bay Neighborhood Chair, if he's here and would like to address us. I'm not seeing any movement, so at this point we will open this item to public comment. Is there any member of the general public that would like to address us at this time? Not seeing any, so we will close public comment and bring this back to the council for discussion. We had a decent discussion about this 2 weeks ago. Not seeing any, so I will look for a motion to substitute the implied motion to be, help me out here, Mr. Jones. So I believe we would like to have a motion to, would it be the exhibit that's on the screen or the ordinance as amended on the screen? I believe we would like to substitute that as our implied motion.
Oh, so, okay, so there's changes to this one from
From 2 weeks ago, yes.
2 weeks ago? Okay, yeah, so I would just recommend a motion to substitute this ordinance for the one in the previous materials.
Okay.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Okay, so we have a substitute motion by Mr. Hanley and a second by Mr. Connect. Any discussion on the substitute motion? All in favor? And that is unanimous with Mr. Winterton excused. And is there any discussion on the new implied motion on the substitute ordinance? See none, I will call for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous with Mr. Winterton excused. Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda is a resolution of the Municipal Council to express support for the Utah State Legislature to increase the minimum age for tobacco purchases and otherwise to consider passing a city law to that effect. And I think that will need a little explanation, and here to do that for us is our Councilor David Sewell, who will be presenting.
So, the Utah State Legislature is currently considering House Bill 324, which has passed the House, and it is, if it passes the Senate, this bill would increase the minimum age for tobacco purchases from 18 to 21, phased over a period of several years. And the resolution before us tonight as the City Council is to encourage the legislature to move forward with passing that statewide law, and if they don't, to consider subsequently passing a law at the city level. Now, I understand, is Mr. Mark Watterson here tonight? I think, Mark, if you don't mind, could you do a little bit of the presentation on this? Because I think you've been more involved in this issue all along. You've worked with Lehigh and Cedar Hills, as I understand, and have been involved in the legislature. So appreciate your attendance tonight.
If you'll state your name and city of residence.
Sure. My name is Mark Watterson. I currently live in Wanship, Utah. So.
Oh, and by way of introduction, let me state that Mark is the Director of Government Relations for Utah for the American Heart Association.
That is correct. So, Council Member Stu, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here tonight. I apologize for running late. There's a number of other tobacco-related bills that are being considered up on the Capitol, and in fact, I was trying to listen in on one when I walked in. But Council Member Sewell is correct that currently we've had Lehigh and Cedar Hills that have recently enacted an ordinance in their cities that have increased the age of tobacco purchasing to 21. The city has done a good job of kind of condensing a lot of the statistics that we've also used in presentations that we've done to their city councils. The number one issue or one of the top statistics that we found to be most compelling is that for tobacco retailers, that 2% of their sales currently go to those aged 19 and 20 years old. However, of that 2% of sales, they supply 90% of the tobacco to our underage youth, so those under the age of 19 here in the state. That's a significant amount, and something that we know that through the increasing the purchasing age, that we're not only giving youth a better chance of avoiding a life of addiction, but we're also helping to cut down on the number of products that are being made available to those younger consumers. I'm happy to answer any questions that council members might have. I can also speak to the statewide bill that is currently being considered in the Senate and will actually be heard Thursday morning in the Senate Business and Labor Committee.
I'd appreciate just a, kind of a nutshell description of the state bill.
Sure. As it is currently written, it's in a first substitute draft, so this is actually the second draft of the bill. It would simply raise the age of minimum purchase to the age of 20 in July 1st, 2020, and then 21, July 1st, 2021. That is the purest form, I guess you could say, of a tobacco to 21 bill. It wasn't always like that, and something that I might mention that might be added into the city's resolution. As the bill came out of committee, it included a lot of what's called preemption language. What that means is the state gives certain authorities to local municipalities in order to govern themselves. Preemption language essentially strips that power away. And so specific to what this bill used to look like, it included a lot of preemption language. Not only to the extent that it would have precluded cities from enacting their own tobacco-related ordinance, but any tobacco-related ordinance that you had on the books currently would have been rescinded. This is, to be honest with you, it's an attempt by the tobacco industry to try and limit the local authority of cities and communities to try and govern for themselves, what tobacco products can be advertised and marketed like in their own communities. So for our organization, and we worked with the mayors of Cedar Hills and Lehigh, as well as the League of Cities and Towns, to try and get that preemption taken out, because it's very important that local municipalities have the ability to dictate tobacco ordinances within their own jurisdiction. So it's something that I had communicated with Councilmember Sewell on that he could probably speak to.
Mr. Watterson, we really appreciated the heads up on that, and we actually discussed that this afternoon. And could you pull up the amendment that we voted on this afternoon? So we've modified the resolution and added this sentence that specifies down in the second to the last paragraph there. Yeah, right there. And added that to our proposed draft.
That's excellent. And I know that Senator Bramble is the Senate co-sponsor on that, and that he covers a large part of this area as well, and something that I believe that he would be really appreciative of as he tries to move this forward in the Senate, is having that local support of ensuring that preemption language is not included in the bill.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you for that presentation. Questions?
Maybe you can answer this, but it's also for us. If we vote unanimously on this, does that make a difference to indicate that on the resolution that this is, I mean, I don't know if that requires changing the wording at all, but just curious.
We wouldn't typically indicate that in the resolution itself. The cover sheet will indicate that it was unanimous. And I suppose what Mr. Strachan could do is, because you're drafting a cover letter, right? So the cover letter that transmits it to the Senate could indicate that it was unanimous if that was the case.
But there is a message in that unanimity, but the council does speak by majority vote, and so even without a unanimous vote, it still carries the weight of the council.
One thing that I might add is that because of the, if the state bill as currently drafted were to be, were to go into effect, the minimum purchase age would be tiered. So you're still 2 years out before it reaches that age of 21. So if it does pass, I would still recommend to the city that they do consider looking at their own ordinance that might put that into place sooner than that July 1st, 2021 date, as Lehigh and Cedar Hills and other cities are considering doing as well.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for stepping up really last minute, and appreciate that. And thank you.
Glad I got down here in time. So thank you, Council, and thank you, Mayor, for your consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sewell, for bringing this to our attention and for your presentation. At this time, we will open up this item for public comment. Would anyone in the attendance like to address this? No, does not look so. So look like it. So we will close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion.
I'm very supportive of this. I'm quite intrigued by the possibility of us revisiting this again on the city level, because my only reservation was the length of time to wait. I don't feel like there's time to wait, personally.
Mr. Van Buren?
I just want to speak for just a moment. The habit of cigarette and tobacco is a very dangerous and hard and difficult habit. I also feel very strongly that a 19-year-old is just as much an adult as a 21-year-old is. And I struggle with trying to legislate people to be healthy. And so I will not be supporting this resolution, and I'll be voting that way.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. Previously in our earlier meeting, we amended the implied motion. So what we voted on earlier is now the implied motion, which is what we see on the screen as well. Any discussion on this or any substitute motions? Mr. Sewell?
If I could just make a comment, I think I view this as not so much restricting anyone's liberty or ability to engage if they in this behavior if they would like to. It's more a matter of restricting the supply and not allowing retailers to profit from selling to our youth. And I don't think anything has come before me in the 5 years that I've been on the council that has the potential to save more lives than this. So I'm just grateful that we're able to participate in this, and those are my feelings about it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. All in favor? And those opposed? In favor were Mr. Connect, Mr. Handley, Mr. Harding, Mr. Sewell, and Mr. Stewart, with Mr. Van Buren opposed, and Mr. Winterton excused. Item number 5 on our agenda has been continued, so we will move along to item number 6, which is an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 4.99 acres of real property generally located at 2450 West, 560 South, from agriculture A15 to one family residential R18. And this is in the Provo Bay Neighborhood. And we will look to Mr. Javin Weaver to present this item.
So this is for a rezone in the Provo Bay Neighborhood for an 18-lot subdivision. If you can go forward slide, please. The area surrounding the property is currently agriculture A15. That's showing the location of it. It abuts two different collector roads on 560 South and 2470 West. The surrounding, on the next map, next, thank you. And, surrounding land uses are R18 and R110 and A1 agriculture land surrounding it. The developer has done the homes just directly west of the project location. The future land use map for the west, for the area on the west side has this area designated as residential, and we found that this rezone aligns with the future land use map as well as with the general plan identifies this area as residential. On the next slide, it shows this. You're seeing the 18-lot subdivision. Lots 13, 14, 15 are accessed through an easement between lots 17, 18 due to zoning code that restricts having access for one-family residential off of collector roads. Developers, or the applicants, worked with staff to come up with this layout, which satisfies the zoning code. Neighborhood issues. There have been a couple issues brought up and Planning Commission, a few people related to we would like it to be a different zone, like it to be the R110. However, it does align with our plans, and staff sees that this area would be, that this rezone fits the future land use for this area. The applicant is here if you do have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Weaver? Okay, thank you. And we will invite the applicant, Mr. Paul Peterson, to come forward if you'd like to address the council.
Good evening. My name is Paul Peterson with Beacon Homes and 422 South Holdings. And our proposal is to do the 18-lot subdivision. I acquired the lots across the street 3 years ago. I didn't develop them, but I built them out. The neighbor across the road who had the vacant property approached me about building it because he liked the homes I was doing. I don't do a standard cookie cutter home. I actually allow anybody to customize any size lot. So I start at $350,000. I customize it to what they want, or I do the upper millions. But in that subdivision across the street, we did a range from upper 300s to 600,000. So we kind of increased the value in the area. It was kind of hard to get appraisals at first just because there was no comps around. But we've kind of established that now, and we're kind of trying to get this one going, and we're hoping that, getting this going, that we can get some new homes in the neighborhood that kind of add a little bit more customization to that neighborhood. So any questions for me?
Great, thank you.
Okay.
And we will now invite the neighborhood chair of the Provo Bay Neighborhood to address us if she is here. And if not, we'll look to the area rep, Ms. Beth Alligood, to address us.
Thank you, Beth Alligood, Southwest Area Representative. This was actually presented to the neighborhood about a year ago? Yeah, it was late last year. So in the neighborhood meeting, I know that there is always a concern about density out there, and some people are asking if they could go up to R110. But most of the people were actually very happy with this. They, like you said, the houses across the street, they're very nice, they're custom made. I think it fits really well within the master plan for the area. It actually kind of feels a little good to start the ball rolling again on the west side and get things moving. I didn't hear, if I'm remembering correctly, I really didn't hear a lot of complaints from the neighborhood at all, other than, you know, they'd like it to see less dense if possible, but this fits perfectly with the general plan and the master plan for the area. So.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
Any questions? All right. At this point, we will open it up broadly to anyone in the audience who would like to address this issue. Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion. I think I'd like to start out as Ms. Alligood just discussed. As she characterized it, it feels good to get the ball rolling again. And part of our discussion on this has been what parameters are being considered when we approve these developments moving forward from a public works and utility capacity perspective. At times, at least I've felt confused. Are we moving forward with developments? Are we holding back on developments? If the capacity is limited, how are we deciding which to approve or which to allow, which not to allow, and whatnot? So we invite a representative from Public Works to come forward and help us understand, at least from the Public Works perspective, how do you evaluate these proposals?
That's a very good question, because I want you to know that we look at each subdivision that comes forward. And if you remember, I believe last summer, we brought to the council a list, I believe it was 14 different areas where we could improve capacity. We do have capacity problems. We have been working on dealing with the I&I problems, as well as trying to improve capacity. Just next door to this, we are spending several $100,000 improving the capacity at the West Side Lift Station. So as we look at each project, this works well as far as a future project that we can say yes to, because of the fact that it will not, well, everything adds to capacity, okay, but this here will not be causing any additional problems because of some of the improvements, the money, the time that we're spending trying to fix some of these problems. So yes, it's kind of hard because there's not a black and white situation where we can say yes and no. We are looking at each one, analyzing the capacity, and looking to see the effect that subdivision has on everything downstream. Does that help answer your question?
Yes. If I could, so we looked at a map earlier in the work session. I believe that was published late last year. Some areas of green, yellow, orange, red. So we do have that resource, but generally, if someone comes and asks about future development, particularly in West Provo, the safest thing to say is there may be capacity issues. Please go talk to Public Works and have them look at the site you're looking at.
That is correct. We are looking at every project, no matter what the color is, to see what the effect is, not only in that area, but all the way down, all the way to the treatment plant.
Okay.
So that's our procedure on every subdivision. We're treating everybody the same. Some we're saying yes to because of this situation, and we're helping solve some of the problems that we've told the council we're trying to resolve.
Excellent. Any questions from the council? Yeah, please.
Gary, then can we assume that, that we don't need to be the gatekeeper on whether we have sewer capacity?
We will let you know if a yes or no with each individual project. So yes, we'll take that analysis underhand, and we will give that recommendation to you whether yes or no. We'll give you that notice that you have some security. We are modeling everything. That map that you saw, it's being changed with each, as this comes on, this will change that map as far as the capacity. Okay, so that map is a living, breathing document from our perspective. So yes, we will help answer that question.
Thank you.
Stay there for just one moment. I also, since we have a couple neighborhood chairs and area rep, does that help you? Do you have any remaining questions about capacity and what the kind of current city policy is on new developments. If you have questions or if you have comments. Okay. Thank you.
This document that came out has actually been very helpful to us as neighborhood chairs because as developers come in, we look at this and see where they're at. So this one is in the yellow zone, so it's got minor sewer capacity issues, but it's not like north of the river or south of it. So, and we know, like I just actually drove by that project that they're talking about, the improvement project, the other day, and saw what was going on out there. So as the developers come to our neighborhoods, this has been very helpful because when they come to me up in my neighborhood and I say, you've got major sewer capacity problems, you're probably not going to get anything in my neighborhood, but in the yellow areas, it's more likely. So we appreciate Public Works doing that and sharing that with us and keeping us updated on it. Was that what you were looking for?
Perfect.
Okay.
I agree with that. I've sent this out actually to my neighborhood so that they can tell whether their property lies between what area, so they can understand why or when or if their property can be developed. The one problem that I do have is that red-yellow area. And so if they continually update that, that would be greatly helpful. But we do have a proposal for a low-density residential unit right there in the red-yellow area. And so that's where my concern would lie.
Okay, thank you. All right. So this item is back for discussion to the council. Any comments? Not seeing any, so yes, Mr. Jones.
I could just procedural. I don't know if council members are aware, but we were sent council staff we were sent by Mr. Weaver a development agreement draft this morning. I don't know that the council's aware of that. And I don't know any of the background details about how that came to be, so Mr. Weaver could address that if we need to. But Bryce, if you could do the same thing, if you could put that development agreement up and show them that paragraph 4 with the special conditions, just so they're aware, because again, if you want to approve the development agreement, we would need to substitute the ordinance.
Mr. Weaver, could you address where this came from, why the developer felt the need to proffer this agreement?
So this came from Planning Commission, and something that I noticed with having the easement area, we were talking, the thought of safety with having typically fences in the rear of the yard are going to be 6 feet, and with people are accessing the properties from this easement in the rear, we thought that might not be the safest, having 6 feet fences and the potential of conflict with children or such. And so we drafted a development agreement to limit I believe the fence height. And it also states the direction of houses that they do need to face the frontage of the streets on 2470 and 560 South as per code. But this mainly is primarily for the fences along the rear, along the easements area.
I think the screen scrolled a little bit, so we can no longer see that. You mentioned, restricted in height. The verbiage that I'm reading here doesn't necessarily say restricted to height, just restricted so as to allow adequate vision for motorists using the driveway. And that, to me, that might be difficult to interpret. Who decides what's adequate vision? There's often, what do they call it? Vision triangles on corners and things like that, but I don't imagine there's NACTO or ASHTO suggestions or standards for interior easements. So does community development feel that this verbiage is sufficient to you know, it's going into a development agreement. Is this enforceable?
For what was documented? Yes, we discussed a few different options for height, but we decided not to restrict it to an exact number and let the home occupant decipher what would be best for that.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask Mr. Peterson to come up and just, if you could just help me understand why, just assure me that this is going to be sufficient, I guess.
Okay. Could you go back to the subdivision site? Does this work or no? So when you're getting back to do you have the pictures of the subdivision? Yeah. If we scroll forward more?
Yeah.
If you could scroll forward more, we have some renderings that we did. So that's a good view right there. So, I mean, it's not totally to scale because we just threw some renderings up really quick. But as you're coming in from that private easement, the reason why they wanted to address it is because technically it's private. I didn't come up with this. This is something that they suggested. So as you're coming in, if those people in the backyard have full height fences, if you come around that corner, you're not going to see kids in this little easement. So generally on a corner, they usually suggest either doing a 36-inch fence or a 42 if it's got the slats between it, because you can still see through. So it's a 50% visibility still if you do every other slat. So that's kind of the suggestion Javin had suggested to me. And I mean, yeah, people probably won't like not having a full height fence, but it's a good idea for the safety. So, and we're going to be adjusting these to have back entry garages for those areas too. So complicates things a little bit more, but that's the new ordinance, is not to have driveways on the collector roads. So we're trying to accommodate that. So any questions about that?
So who has responsibility for the upkeep of that access driveway, road? How does that?
Well, it's going to be shared between those owners. So, I mean, I prefer not to do it. I prefer to empty out on the regular roads like the older homes do to the north and 200 to the west, but or to the east here. But so yeah, it's going to be a shared responsibility. I wasn't going to
restrictive covenant or anything?
I wasn't going to do any. I mean, it's going to be it's going to be deeded to all of them. So they're going to have basically, they're going to all have ownership of that. So it's going to be their responsibility. I wasn't going to create an HOA. I was really trying to avoid that just because it restricts what we can do in the area. So. Unless there's a suggestion to, I mean, my personal opinion, I've never seen homes on collector roads facing it, but not being able to empty onto it. I live in American Fork and Pleasant Grove area, and most of the new developments, if they have a small collector road that's 30 miles an hour, they still have the driveways empty onto it, just because it creates problems like this where you don't, I mean, we went through about 15 renderings of this for a couple months. So this was the best solution we came with, having that access. But that would require the change in the zoning or the code, being able to allow the collector roads. They are pretty wide collector roads. So it's wide enough where you're not backing out into traffic. You'd be on the shoulder still, on the 2470. So.
Do I hear a comment?
Yeah, I appreciate your concern and frustration, but I believe it's through long, hard experience that we've come to the conclusion that collector roads need to have that restriction, because sooner or later the traffic being a collector road gets to the point where it's inherently dangerous. So it's unfortunate that it causes problems, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. So that was our solution to it, and that's why we came up with that agreement on the fence. So, any other questions? Or?
Thank you. I appreciate you coming back up. Okay, so I believe at this point we are looking, unless there's more discussion, we'll look for a motion to amend the implied motion to include the development agreement that has been shown on our screen.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Connect. Seconded by Mr. Handley. Any discussion on the implied motion that has been substituted, the substituted implied motion? The implied motion as currently substituted. Mr. Jones.
Well, right now, you're just asking for comment on the motion to substitute.
Thank you. I did jump a step there. Any discussions on the substitution of the implied motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? That is unanimous. Any discussion on the now substituted implied motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? All right, and that motion passes unanimously. Our final item is number 7, an ordinance amending Provo City Code to clarify provisions regarding boards and commissions. This will be presented by our council attorney, Brian Jones.
Well, in lieu of a presentation, I just remind you that if we finish in a minute and a half, we're supposed to get ice cream.
Comment, Mr. Chairman? There are questions about this board and commission item.
This item was presented at our work session today. It's really just a cleanup of the code. Elizabeth Vanderwerken from council staff identified during our last round of appointments several provisions of our boards and commissions chapters that just needed to be cleaned up, and this is intended to accomplish that. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Even from the administration.
And we did have a very thorough presentation earlier by Ms. Vanderwerken. Any questions for our presenter? We will open this up to public comment for the 2 private citizens that are here. Seeing no interest, we will close public comment. Do we have... We are anxious, aren't we? Any discussion on the implied motion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. All in favor? And that is unanimous. So with that, if there's no objection, with nothing else on our agenda, we will now adjourn by unanimous consent.